When we build applications, we often need to serve static resources that are used to build our view. When we talk about static resources, we're talking about CSS files, images, and JavaScript files that are going to help build the user interface that is viewed by the user. In this lesson, we will talk about how to configure the Spring Dispatcher servlet to serve those static resources. Looking at our home.jsp page, we're going to make a simple change to this page. We're going to have the text home displayed in red and using an h1 tag. The first thing I'm going to do is modify the JSP. So I'm just going to add an h1 tag around home. We have that tag that surrounds our content. Now we're going to specify some CSS that is going to make that text red. We're going to place our text within an external CSS file. Within the web app directory in our package explorer, I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it resources. And then within that new resources folder, I'm going to add another new folder and I'm going to call it CSS. Within our CSS folder, I'm going to use the new dialog to then create a CSS file, which I will name home.css. Within our home.css file, I'm just going to provide a style for the h1 tag, and I'm simply going to make the color red. Once you have added this style to the home.css file, you can actually close that, and we're back to our home.jsp page. Now, one thing we need for this lesson, and this is getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, is we need to add a Spring tag library so that we can provide the external CSS file link. Right after our page declaration here, we're going to add another declaration for that tag library. All you need to do is type taglib, and after taglib, you put the prefix for the taglib. It's going to be Spring. And now we specify a URI that identifies the location of our taglib. And we don't have to worry about adding this taglib within the webinf directory because it's within the Spring MVC jar. Here you see the URI is simply http://www.springframework.org/tags. And that's enough to use this tag library within our JSP. And this tag library is really simple. It's provided by Spring, and it provides us with some additional features to help with data binding, also themes, and resolving URLs, which is the feature that we're going to be using. When we create our link to include the external style sheet within our head tag, we will use this tag library in order to construct our link. I'm going to create a new link, and we need to specify that it is a style sheet. And then we provide the href attribute to point to the location of our style sheet. So here's where the Spring tag library comes in. We use this Spring URL tag to add the context root to the URL that we're using here. The CSS file is within the resources directory, then the CSS directory, and then the home.css directory. And then we just need to close our tag, close the quotation for the href tag, and then we need to specify that this is type text/CSS. And finally, we are done setting up our link. With this in place, we would expect that home would display red. Let's try to run this demonstration. I'm going to navigate to the Package Explorer and scroll up to our project. And then I'm going to hit Shift-Alt-X, then R, and this is going to run our project on the Pivotal TC server. There we see our console getting kicked off, the server started. Now we're taken to our web browser, and we need to use the home path in order to map to our controller that's going to display the home page. And look what happened. Home is not red. Now the h1 tag you can see is applied. Let's head back to our console to see exactly what happened. If we scroll and look at our console, you'll see that it's saying there is no mapping found for HTTP requests with URI course-project/resources/css/home.css. It's saying it cannot find our home.css file, and that's because it's being handled by the dispatcher servlet. When the web page makes the request to bring back the external CSS file, it does not receive the file because the dispatcher servlet's attempting to route it, and it's trying to find a logical view name associated with that URI that was sent into the dispatcher servlet, and there's no controllers mapped to that URI, so the dispatcher servlet can't find it, basically returns a 404. How do we handle that? Well, we need to provide some additional configuration within our dispatcher servlet.xml file. I'm going to open that up, and now let's add some configuration that will help with resolving our static resources. To the rescue comes the MVC namespace, and it actually has a tag configured just for this purpose, and it's the resources tag. We just need to provide the location of our resources. When we have a request come in for a particular mapping, which we specify in the next attribute, we want that request to go to this location. And that location is actually the resources directory underneath our web app directory. Specify resources and make sure you add the trailing /. And now for the mapping, we want this mapping to apply to any URI that comes in that contains resources within it. We're going to use /resources /* there. And the reason we're using double asterisks is because it is an ANT style path mapping. This allows it to map URIs that may have additional / in them. So we may have something like /resources /css /home.css. And having that double asterisk there allows it to navigate down further into quote unquote the subdirectories within that path. Okay, so we're going to save this change to our dispatcher servlet configuration file. And now we're going to head back to the Package Explorer, and we're going to run our project again and tell it you want to restart the server because we want to make sure these changes take place. Once the server has started up, the browser will display, and we're going to hit that home URL again. And look, this time it's red, and actually if we explore with Firebug, well, we can hit that again. So I'll hit that URL again. There we see that it was able to resolve the request, and we should see that our CSS file came over. In this lesson, we learned how to resolve static resources using the Spring Dispatcher servlet. And for the most part, we're just having particular URIs be excluded from getting routed by the dispatcher servlet.